Hey there, welcome to Film in the Blank. My name's Ian, I watch a lot of movies. Here's everything I watched this month. I started the month off with One Battle After Another, written and directed by Paul Thomas Anderson. This is the movie for our times. PTA's take on this kind of thriller is unlike any other I've seen. Instead of structuring the film around a protagonist who's thrust into a wild journey, as is the case with every other thriller, PTA thrust the whole world into that journey. Leo, the supporting characters, entire communities, no one is safe when fascists rise to power. It's a phenomenal piece of filmmaking, shot flawlessly by Michael Bauman and scored brilliantly by Johnny Greenwood. It's gonna be a brawl between this and Sinners for that Best Score Oscar this year. It's profoundly funny in a way it has no business being, with bold flourishes of visual storytelling popping throughout like only PTA can. The main cast delivers career best work. I mean, I didn't have Make Sean Penn getting a third Oscar my entire personality on my bingo card for this year, but here we are. And I have to mention how impeccable the casting is, particularly for all of these smaller 1 or 2 line roles. They're all memorable enough to nail their moment in the spotlight, but not too memorable that they disrupt the flow of this monster of a film. If that's not walking a cinematic tightrope, I don't know what is. Casting director Cassandra Koulakounis, I salute you. 5 stars. Next, an 80s classic, 1987's RoboCop, written by Edward Neumeier and Michael Miner, and directed by Paul Verhoeven. RoboCop is a true cinematic anomaly. It's sci-fi, but it's kitschy, it's gory, but it's goofy, there's laughs, both intended and unintended, and it's all set against the backdrop of futuristic Dallas, Texas. It shouldn't all work together as well as it does, which I have to figure is thanks to director Paul Verhoeven, who's made a career out of tonally fluid films like Showgirls, Starship Troopers, and Elle. But for an action film called RoboCop, all that really matters is that RoboCop is as cool and state-of-the-art as possible. They gave him only the best, top-of-the-line features like senior citizen walking speed, a dump truck gymnast ass, always walking like he's really gotta poop, and most importantly, blowjob lips. Nailed it. 4 stars. Then, Akira Kurosawa's most accessible film, 1958's The Hidden Fortress, written by Akira Kurosawa, Ryuzo Kikushima, Hideo Oguni, and Shinobu Hashimoto, and directed by Akira Kurosawa. It's crazy to finally see this movie now after working my way through a good amount of Kurosawa's filmography because The Hidden Fortress feels so shockingly mainstream for Kurosawa. He still invests his usual genius into his characters and scene work, but he also incorporates elements of more traditional adventure films to great effect. The result is a grand, peppy, often funny action film that feels more ambitious than Seven Samurai in scope. I also really loved the hesitant score that felt like a departure from how most of his films sound as well. Run, don't walk to see The Hidden Fortress. 4.5 stars. Then I watched A Big, Bold, Beautiful Journey, written by Seth Reese and directed by Kogonada. If you'd have told me the absolute worst thing I'd watched this month was a new film from Kogonada, I'd condescendingly tell you that you must be mistaken and then harshly judge what you're wearing. But to my absolute shock, this is actively terrible, full of some of the flattest, cringiest dialogue I've heard in years, and an entire structure that just simply doesn't work. All of the film's seeming assets, like punchy visual design and charming leads, start to work against the film by making all the glaring flaws candy-colored and overly peppy. I don't know how the director who created beautiful films like Columbus and After Yang also pinched this one off, but I hope at least he knows where it all went wrong so he never dips this low again. 1.5 stars. Then over to my Bergman for the month, 1978's Autumn Sonata, written and directed by Ingmar Bergman. No film has ever begged more for a small window in the bottom corner of the screen with a panel of acting legends giving play-by-play color commentary on the flawless acting in the film. I'm talking Katharine Hepburn in a blazer and little mic'd headset, barking out "Simply Divine" every time Ingrid Bergman manically sighs or Liv Ullmann shoves her feelings down even deeper. I wish the shift that comes mid-film happened much sooner so we could dive more into the gritty pit of despair that is the relationship between these two women, but I guess you need a good amount of tense buildup before the pot boils over to make it all worth something. 4 stars. Then The Reason Being Dragged Out of a Room While Shouting "I'm Better Than You" is on my bucket list, 1964's Failsafe, written by Walter Bernstein and directed by Sidney Lumet. The number of Sidney Lumet films I've given a perfect score to is getting a bit out of hand, but I am powerless when the work is this strong. I'm a fan of Dr. Strangelove, but this film from the same year with a very similar plot works better for me, because as fun as Looming Nuclear War is as a comedy, you can't build the stakes high enough without committing hard to the tension of the moment, and Failsafe commits. I also have to talk about the gorgeous lighting that highlights characters' eyes throughout. It locks the audience into each character's state of mind terrifically and looks pretty damn good. Just another reason why Sidney Lumet is one of the greatest directors ever. 5 stars. Next, I checked out the indie Twinless, written and directed by James Sweeney. Folks, it's Dylan O'Brien Power Top Autumn, and it's glorious. He really stands out as a true actor here in a way I haven't seen him do before. It's a showcase for his range and his sincerity as a performer. His co-lead James Sweeney is a better writer-director than actor here, and maybe would have liked to see someone else in his role to let him solely focus on the behind-the-camera work more. If Twinless appeals to you, go in as blind as possible and enjoy where things take you. 3.5 stars. Then for a second dose of Dylan O'Brien, Caddo Lake, written and directed by Logan George and Celine Held. Caddo Lake follows two strangers whose lives become intertwined when a young girl mysteriously disappears on the titular lake. There's a lot of spoiler territory here, so I'm going to be as vague as possible when I say that for as gripping as the film is for the most part, it doesn't really have anything to say or add to the genre waters it's swimming in. What it does do is slick and simple enough, but I can think of several other films that do it all better with more payoff and emotional resonance. 3 stars. Up next, the truest piece of art of the bunch, 1985's Mishima, A Life in 4 Chapters, written by Paul Schrader and Leonard Schrader, and directed by Paul Schrader. Watching this while eating a particularly slammin' grilled cheese was the perfect sensory overload, strong recommend. Mishima's got one of the all-time great scores from Philip Glass, transcendent production design from Aiko Ishioka, and Paul Schrader's unforgiving direction guiding it all. The partly fictitious film follows famed author Yukio Mishima at key moments in his life, intermingled with striking dramatizations from 3 of his novels, all working to shed light on who Mishima was and what he became toward the end of his life. It'll surprise you, it'll grip you, I can't recommend it enough. 5 stars. Then over to my boy Quasi in 1939's The Hunchback of Notre Dame, written by Sonia Levine and Bruno Frank, and directed by William Dieterle. Who among us could resist someone looking us straight in the eye and earnestly asking, "Shall I play the bells for you?" So yeah, I loved this a lot. It's shot beautifully with a mix of location shooting and soundstage shooting complementing each other seamlessly. There's great performances anchored by Charles Laughton's nuanced take on Quasimodo. In light of being my favorite Disney film of all time, the 90s animated version surpasses this one, but I'm impressed at how close this came to unseating it. 4.5 stars. Up next, another Ari Aster mindfuck, Eddington, written and directed by Ari Aster. Eddington is unwieldy and half-baked at its worst, and enthralling and darkly funny at its best. For as often as it bumped for me and how much steam the second half squandered, I'm a bit puzzled my score isn't lower. Maybe I need a rewatch or two down the road to let the dust fully settle, but for now, 3.5 stars. Up next, more proof all movies should start with a mood-setting overture, 1955's East of Eden, written by Paul Osborne and directed by Elia Kazan. When it comes to watchable actors, it's hard to top James Dean. His style of acting seems rooted in this continuous chain reaction of inscrutable internal collisions that he lets bubble up to the surface. He's poised yet wild, tender yet forceful, and East of Eden gives him another juicy role to make all his own in a world of dusty vistas and canted angles. I'm also blown away that the great Lois Smith, who's been in everything from Twister and Minority Report to Lady Bird and 5 Easy Pieces, made her feature film debut opposite James Dean in this 70 years ago. 4 stars. Then I watched The Conjuring Last Rites, written by Ian Goldberg, Richard Nang, and David Leslie Johnson McGoldrick, and directed by Michael Chaves. I've seen ghosts do some fucked up shit in movies, but blowing out the candle on your birthday cake before you can is some Machiavellian shit. I really liked how this built up in the first act, but everything after that felt lackluster and well below the magic of the first 2 Conjuring films. There were some nice moments of direction that showed someone was awake behind the camera for it all, so I'll give it a generous 3 stars. Then I willingly sent myself into a depressive spiral by watching 1977's The Devil Probably, written and directed by Robert Bresson. I can't imagine recommending a film this relentlessly nihilistic to anyone, but if you've got a particularly upbeat spring in your step one day and can stomach a film dripping with as much bleak emptiness as Bresson slathers on here, it's worth the effort. Even at 96 minutes, some parts felt too repetitive, but Bresson packs some standout moments in the right spots to keep it at least philosophically intriguing. 2 that really landed with me are the reveal of the meaning behind that odd title and the picture-perfect last moment of the film. I did take off half a star for an unnecessarily upsetting shot in the first 5 minutes that really didn't need to be there. 3.5 stars. Then it's a cute bird, but not so cute of a movie, 1965's The Sandpiper, written by Dalton Trumbo and Michael Wilson, and directed by Vincent Minnelli. This melodramatic Elizabeth Taylor, Richard Burton vehicle tries to skate by on the vibes of its leading stars, the picturesque beauty of Big Sur, and one very bluesy jazz trumpet. For as much angst as Vincent Minnelli injects into the fairly boring plot, it still flatlines pretty quickly. Better luck next time, jazz trumpet. 2 stars. Then back to when I got my driver's license, the fall of 2006, written by Tarsem Singh, Dan Gilroy, and Nico Soltanakis, and directed by Tarsem Singh. A supremely endearing child actor performance and Lee Pace are two of my top criteria for liking any film, so kinda nailed it with this one. I know The Fall has its own fervent cult following, but I gotta figure if it didn't come out the same year as its tonal and spiritual sister film Pan's Labyrinth, it would occupy a much larger chunk of the zeitgeist. Because whereas Pan's Labyrinth takes its subject matter in a dark, malevolent direction, The Fall embraces fantasy with more wide-eyed wonder in a style that's lighter visually and emotionally. Both are phenomenal films, so I'll give The Fall 4.5 stars. Next, Highest to Lowest, written by Alan Fox and directed by Spike Lee. Spike Lee has directed some exceptional cream-of-the-crop films, but he's also directed some confusingly shoddy films. Highest to Lowest easily falls into that latter category. There are flashes of Spike's slick style that works here and there, but for the most part it's a stilted, muddled mess that's scored like an episode of The West Wing, and I don't mean that last part as a compliment. 2 stars. Then I watched 1993's Shortcuts, written by Robert Altman and Frank Barheit, and directed by Robert Altman. Robert Altman is clearly showing off how big of a cinematic beast he can wrangle with this sprawling, stuff-to-the-gills film, which would be awkward or embarrassing if he didn't pull every bit of it off and then some. The film follows one of the largest leading ensemble casts I can think of, everyone from Robert Downey Jr., Jack Lemmon, and Julianne Moore, to Lily Tomlin, Huey Lewis, and even Alex Trebek. Despite that, it never buckles under its own weight, and even though it's a crisp 3 hours, 8 minutes, the story flows, everyone delivers, and LA shines in the spotlight. It's no Magnolia, but it's quite the feat. 4.5 stars. Up next, two of the best actors working today in the history of sound, written by Ben Shattuck and directed by Oliver Hermanus. If your foreplay doesn't include humming, discussing folk songs, or drinking a tall glass of water, the history of sound is here to let you know you're doing it wrong. Josh O'Connor and Paul Mescal have fantastic chemistry together, and they find moments amidst the film's oppressively timid vibe to show how connected their characters are with each other. It just feels like the overly sedate mood holds the film back as much as it helps define it, but overall still a touching story with an ending that hit way harder than I was expecting. 3 stars. Then a little film that fell through the cracks for me earlier this year, Relay, written by Justin Piasecki and directed by David Mackenzie. I've said before how much I love thrillers featuring a heavy dose of fax machines, and now I've got to add thrillers absolutely swimming in teleprinter relay devices for the deaf. So much of this movie is Riz Ahmed sitting, Riz typing, someone reading what Riz typed aloud, Riz typing, Riz walking with his backpack, Riz typing, Riz walking somewhere, sitting down and typing. It's consistently tedious in the way waiting for fax machines to turn out a letter in a thriller is tedious, and I love it. As for the film as a whole, it's a rare instance of a competent, solid thriller that needlessly undoes itself in the last act. If this film ended 10 minutes before it did, it'd probably be a solid 3.5 stars, but alas it did not, so I gotta give it 2.5 stars. Next, 2012's dazzling Anna Karenina, written by Tom Stoppard and directed by Joe Wright. I've seen some stellar book-to-film adaptations this year, from The Grapes of Wrath to Dr. Zhivago, and while both of those films are highly cinematic in their own rights, no adaptation fully gave in to the art of filmmaking like Joe Wright's Anna Karenina. The visuals are enamoring, the direction is deliciously crisp, and the inventive production design brings boundless energy to the film. But it all works together especially well thanks to the little moments of wholly utilized movie-making magic, like the sound of Kira's fluttering fan slowly morphing into the sound of horses running. That's the kind of slick movie shit we need in these dark times. 4 stars. Up next, 2023's Rotting in the Sun, written by Sebastian Silva and Pedro Peirano, and directed by Sebastian Silva. Rotting in the Sun is the spunky new member of the club for strange little movies that have no business existing. It's a quasi-sequel to one of director Sebastian Silva's earlier films from 15 years ago, featuring Silva and comedian Jordan Firstman playing themselves amidst a sea of unsimulated sex scenes, murder, and other absurdities. I'm frustrated the second half lost me as much as it did because the first half showed some real promise, including a moment of Jordan Firstman spiraling while wearing Melania's infamous I really don't care do you coat. That's pretty iconic. 3 stars. Then a throwback to the elegant and soulful hype houses of yore, 1937's Stage Door, written by Maury Riskind and Anthony Vaylor, and directed by Gregory LaCava. It feels like I've seen this specific kind of theater-centric 30s film over and over, this time centering on a New York boarding house for aspiring Broadway actresses. Stage Door is one of the more engaging of that subgenre, I guess, benefiting tremendously from the chemistry between Katharine Hepburn, Ginger Rogers, Lucille Ball, Oscar-nominated Andrea Leeds, and the rest of the women. Not a great chance I'll remember much about this months from now, but hey, that's showbiz, kid. 3 stars. Then Oh Hi! Written and directed by Sophie Brooks. This had a much weaker script than I was anticipating, and that really shows in the second half when the film loses interest in the core ideas it brought up in the first half and just pivots into goofy territory. If writer-director Sophie Brooks truly committed to the relationship-defining kidnapping premise and didn't force extraneous characters into a script clearly suited solely for the 2 leads, this could have been something more than just alright. 3 stars. And I finished things off with 1964's Zorba the Greek, written and directed by Michael Kakianis. Wait, this movie is so distressing. Why are people dancing and full belly laughing? Save for Zorba's famous dance breaks and a few sporadic intriguing moments, I really struggled to find much to connect with here. I am gonna add this towards the top of my rewatch soon list, just because of how endearingly I've heard people talk about this, but it's not looking good. 2.5 stars. Let me know in the comments what are your thoughts on these movies, any others I should check out, how does your family celebrate Dylan O'Brien Power Top Autumn? Also stay tuned for other great commentary videos, reviews, video essays, and more. You can check me out on Letterboxd at Cineramadome24 or on TikTok at Film in the Blank. I appreciate you liking and subscribing. See you next time.